There was once a man who inherited his grandmother's house, a beautiful old Victorian with high ceilings and hardwood floors that creaked in all the familiar places. He had loved visiting this house as a child, racing up and down the staircase, hiding in closets during games of hide and seek, falling asleep to the sound of her sewing machine humming late into the night. When she died, she left him everything: the house, the furniture, the memories embedded in every room. He moved in gladly. It felt like coming home. But there was one room on the second floor that he couldn't bring himself to enter: his grandmother's sewing room. The door was slightly ajar, as she had left it. He could see the edge of her chair, the corner of her sewing machine, sunlight filtering through lace curtains onto fabric she would never finish. Every time he walked past that door, he felt it: the pull to go inside, and the stronger pull to keep walking. Months turned into years. The man lived fully in every other part of the house. He renovated the kitchen, painted the living room, turned the basement into an office. But that one door remained untouched, a boundary he couldn't cross. His friends would visit and ask about the closed room. "What's in there?" "Oh, just some old sewing stuff," he would say, changing the subject quickly. But it wasn't just sewing stuff. It was the last conversation he never had with her. It was the guilt of being too busy to visit more often. It was the grief he had never allowed himself to feel fully because someone had to be strong for the family. It was every regret and every unfinished goodbye compressed into one small space that felt too big to enter. This is what we do with difficult emotions. We create rooms for them in our minds and then refuse to go inside. We live around our pain, not through it. We build entire lives carefully constructed to avoid the one door we're afraid to open. The room of abandonment from childhood. The room of dreams we gave up. The room of words we should have said. The room of love we were too afraid to accept. The room of anger we were taught was unacceptable. The room of shame we carry from mistakes we can't undo. We become architects of avoidance, masters of distraction. We fill our days with noise so we can't hear what's behind that door. We stay busy so we don't have time to stop and feel. We surround ourselves with people so we're never alone with our thoughts. But the room doesn't go away because you ignore it. It doesn't disappear because you pretend it's not there. If anything, it grows larger, more powerful, more frightening, because avoidance feeds fear, and fear grows in darkness. The man in the Victorian house began to notice how much energy it took to avoid one small room, how he would unconsciously change his route through the house to avoid walking past that door, how he would fill his evenings with television and work and social obligations to avoid the quiet moments when he might be tempted to face what he was avoiding, how he had shaped his entire life around the circumference of his fear. One rainy Thursday afternoon, when the house felt particularly empty, he finally stopped in front of the door. He didn't plan it. He wasn't ready. He simply ran out of the energy it took to keep walking past. His hand was shaking as he pushed the door open. The room was smaller than he remembered, dusty and ordinary. Her sewing machine sat silent under a white sheet. Fabric scraps scattered across the table, like pieces of a puzzle she would never complete. And on the windowsill, a small framed photo of them together, from when he was 12 years old, both grinning at the camera with gap-toothed smiles. He sat in her chair and cried, not the polite tears of a funeral, but the ugly, gut-wrenching sobs of someone who had finally stopped running from his own heart. He cried for every visit he had postponed, every phone call he had rushed through, every time he had been too busy for the woman who was never too busy for him. And then, when the crying was done, something unexpected happened. He felt lighter, not because the pain was gone, but because he had finally stopped carrying it in secret. Not because the regret had disappeared, but because he had acknowledged it instead of burying it. The room that had felt so dangerous, so overwhelming, so impossible to enter, turned out to be just a room, with sunlight and dust and memories that belonged to him as much as they belonged to grief. Here's what nobody tells you about the rooms you avoid. The anticipation is always worse than the reality. The fear of feeling is always more powerful than the feeling itself. The stories you tell yourself about what's behind that door are usually more terrible.